All right, I will say good night of Shabbos. Good evening, everyone. Plenty of sheets. Chaburah, over here, you have sheets? Good. Okay, fine. Thank you. Oh, Ali, I'm sorry. Did I just... Baruch Meir, if there's one more. So I can give Ali. All right, so I will say, so let's begin. So we're beginning in Meretz Hashem. B'Shatov Mitzlachas, a new section in the Chalban tonight. Page Samech Aleph. So to continue in our journey a little bit, so Baruch Hashem, first of all, welcome back. Hopefully everybody had a beautiful and uplifting Yom Tiv. It's like, it's wonderful. Baruch Hashem, nice to see everyone back. And hopefully it was an incredible opportunity for Aliyah. I think also the pieces we did from the Chalban before Yom Tiv about the Leil HaSeder, the power of the Leil HaSeder, I think were especially transformative. But now we're coming back to our Sefer that we've been learning for the last few months, the Sefer of Hakitzu V'Ranenu, where the Chalban speaks about the dynamic of Geula. What Geula means, how Geula manifests itself, how Geula plays out. So we'll say, so with that, let's begin with this section. Shnei Shlabei HaGeula Pekido Uzechira. So we'll say, up until now, what we've been very much focused on is the Chalban's fundamental distinction between Galus and Geula. Between Galus and Geula. Ultimately, again, wherein lies that fundamental distinction? Here, what the Chalban wants to focus on is, in Geula itself, there are two stages. Now, the truth is, one could actually make the argument that there's many more than two stages. But he's talking about really, at the end of the Geula process, there are two fundamental stages, what he calls Pekida and Zechira. So let's take a look. Shnei hashlavim shel Geula, v'hevdel b'neim, mevu'arim heitei b'sfarim hakidoshim. So these two levels of Geula, so literally translated, by the way, Pekida. So it's interesting because in English, they translate very similarly, right? Pekida means what? Vashem pakad esara. Pekida?
Counted. Acknowledged.
Hashem pakad esara. Remembered, right? So Hashem pakad esara. Hakadosh Baruch Hu remembered Sarah for Zechira. What does Zechira mean? Remembered. So what's interesting to note is the two words in English translate similarly, but remember again, obviously there's a distinction. The pasuk doesn't say Vashem Zachar es Sarah, could have just said easily, right? Hashem Pakad es Sarah. And yet, again, we find Pekida and Zechira, although they translate the similar way in English, Lamaisa, we're going to see they mean two fundamentally different things. So the Chalban posits that they refer to two different stages in the process of Geula. So look what he writes.
The difference between remembering the past as far as something for the future?
So, right. So, for example, Hashem Pakar Sarah means Hashem remembered the promise that He made for the future, right? Versus Zechira, which is more historical, right? That is absolutely true. Pakar is often remembering, but future. Zechira is much more retrospective. Excellent. So look what the Chalban writes. He says, "Hulimeid." So he quotes here from the Ramchal, and the Ramchal writes, "Hulimeid shetalich hageula haasida murkov mishnei shlavim ikari." He says that the process of Geula, is made up of two levels, two fundamental levels. Shem nikraim batorah pekida uzechira v'kach kasav. So this is a quote from the Ramchal from Moshe Chaim Lutzato in a section called Ma'amar HaGeula. So the Ramchal writes, "Da ki leGeula nimtzu shnei zmanim." There are two stages or two times for Geula. Umitza'anum begeulas Mitzrayim begeulas Bavel benoda lanu shekeiniyeh ba'asida lihigalos mihira b'yameinu b'al ila shnei hazmanim nemar bepasik. So first of all, the Ramchal writes over here is very interesting. There are two different, what he calls times, but really the better statement is there's two different stages. Two different stages to Geula. He says we find these stages in the redemption from Mitzrayim and the redemption from Bavel, which I will say we notice by the comparison is very interesting because there are two fundamentally different types of redemption. Right? Geulas Mitzrayim was absolute. Geulas Bavel was not absolute. Remember again when we come out of Babylonian diaspora, which is again after the Purim story, right? After the Purim story with Esther's son, Daryavesh, who goes ahead and, begins the process of building the Beis HaMikdash. That Geula is not a complete Geula. There's not Jewish autonomy, full Jewish autonomy during times of the second Beis HaMikdash. I mean, there were periods of it. So he refers to these two different stages of Geula, comparing it to Bavel and Mitzrayim. Va'al eile shnei hazmanim nemar b'pasuk, al tismichi, al yaftali, zazman harishon hanikra pekida. Ki eshev b'choshech Hashem arli, hu hasheni v'nikra zechira. So we'll leave aside the psukim for just a moment. But I want to point out over here that the Chalban's categorization over here of two different levels of Geula, two different stages, one being Pekida, one being Zechira, is not the Chalban's invention. This already is found in the works of the Ramchal, of course, hundreds of years earlier. So now the Chalban expands on this, and he says, Hashlav Arishon, Sod HaPekida, the first stage of Geula, that we call the Sod, the secret, or the essence, Pekida, Ramos b'pasuk atismichi ayaftali kinafalti kanti. Umevuar, and again, literally translated, what that pasuk means is, my enemies do not rejoice over me, for even though I have fallen, I have gotten back up. Umevar haramchal shehu bechinas his galus Hashem b'derech nisteras. I will say this is so profound. The Ramchal says the first stage of Gula, what we call Pekida, is a revelation of Hashem, but it's a revelation of Hashem in Teva, in the natural order of the world. So the world looks as it is, right? But Hashem is manifest in Teva, in nature. Bisoch levushe haTeva. He's literally clothed in the natural order of the world. He goes on, V'ikaro mechavein litikun hachitzonios sod haguf haleumi lahakim es Yisrael me'afar hagalos Lashiva mipizuram ulahoshiv alad masam. So I'll say this is incredible. In the first stage of Geula, so ultimately again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is beginning the redemptive process. But the Ribono Shel Olam's involvement, right? His involvement is cloaked in the natural order of the world. In other words, in the stage of Pekida, there's nothing supernatural that's occurring. Well, if there's nothing supernatural, so how do you know that you're in Pekida? So the Chalban posits that what marks the stage of Pekida, listen to this, is lahakim es Yisrael me'afar hagalos. Number one, to lift us out of diaspora. Lahashivam mipizuram, to go ahead and gather us from our scattering, and to bring us back to our land. That's the first stage of Geula, what the Ramchal and ultimately what the Chalban call Pekida. La'achar mikan, after that, Yovo Hashlav Haba. Then the second stage of Geula comes. That's called Sod HaZechira. And what happens in Zechira? V'hu ramuz b'pasuk ki eishe b'choshech Hashem arli. That's found in the pasuk of, I sit in the darkness, Hashem is my light. Meaning what? Shebo tagia haora ligiloi ubihirus. We'll say in the second stage of Geula, in what we call Zechira, Zechira is where the presence of the Ribono Shel Olam is manifest in a dramatic way. There's a great light that shines in the world. V'yakiru hakol as Hashem Yisbarach. Everyone is going to recognize Hashem, Samech Beis, Ves Yado Hamushalas. And will recognize ultimately again His reigning hand. The fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in control. So we'll say, what the Chalban just did for us is a really profound Yesod frame these two stages. Stage one, which ultimately again is Pekida. And in Pekida again, the Geula process starts. Klal Yisrael is lifted up from the dirt, from the dust of Galus. We're gathered. We're brought back to Eretz Yisrael. That's Pekida. That's the first stage. But again, everything looks natural. The second stage, Zechira, ultimately again, that's where the great light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu becomes manifest in the world. Mankind recognizes the Ribono Shel Olam, and the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu rests upon the entire world. Pekida, af shiu ba inyanim atzumim shel Geula, Adayin hi bechinas ki eshev b'choshech. Shekach od lo ba hadea v'hasoga habeira shala'am ki bepekida haise his galus Hashem ederech nisteres. Hasoga hi ha'or la'adam. Fine. So we'll say, so before we get to this. So therefore, now what we have over here is as follows. So here the Chalban jumps back. And he says, in Pekida, even though again, Geula is happening, we don't always recognize that Geula. We don't always recognize it. Then I will say, based on what the Chalban said, why don't we always recognize, why wouldn't we recognize the Geula of Pekida? Why not? Right, because Hashem is not explicit, because it's cloaked in Teva, it's cloaked in the natural world. But by the way, there's also something else. Remember again, in previous Shurim, we spoke so much about the fact that the Deya, the Das of Geula, is so fundamentally different than the Das of Geula. Right? Galus and Geula have two different levels of Das. That's why we spoke about it. Remember again, what kind of Torah do we learn in Galus? What kind of Torah did the Chalban say? What do we learn in Galus? Halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa. Right? That's Galus Torah. That's Galus Torah. And ultimately, again, what's Geula Torah? Geula Torah is the Paninius of Torah. Is the Torah's Hanistar. There's a difference in the Deya, in the Das, that a Yid has during the times of Galus, even in the times of Pekida versus Zechira. In Pekida, I still have Galus Das. Because I still have Galus Das, I don't see a lot of the things that are happening. They're happening. I don't see them. Or even if I see them, I don't internalize them for what they... This might be loud. There's no celery rule if you're within dollar hours. That's I'm kidding. So ultimately, again, you could be in the middle of Geula, but in Pekida with Galus Das, you don't even see what's unfolding. He goes on. He says, "Ki Pekida, he says Galus Hashem b'derech nisteres hasoga hiya or la'adam v'chol od shelo ba ilav hariu ki yoshi b'choshech." So the Ramchal goes on. Look at the next paragraph. He says, "Aval shnei divarim tzarich sheteda." Ramchal says there are two things you have to understand. Shelo husser hester panim elo lifnai v'lifnim makom nishmo sisra v'lo lachutz ki eila ha'oros v'chol hadvarim ha'eila derech pnimios ha'ma'orosheim v'lo nira achutza. See, Rabbi say in the stage of Pekida, even Rabbi say, isn't this incredible? You could be living in a time where Geula is unfolding all around you, but I don't see it. I just don't see it. I just don't recognize it, because in the Pekida stage of things, at the end of the day, Galus is unfolding. Geula is unfolding, but I'm still stuck with Galus Das. So the Ramchal says, because the true light is not yet external, the true light is still being kept internal. V'alkein lo egia mehem hisorus v'lo tikon rak liYisrael. He goes on. He says, "V'zoya pekida." Skip to the next paragraph. "V'zoya pekida shehi ha'ara b'pnimis haneshama shelo noda b'galoi la'adamu l'sa'agaso." So I will say this is also incredible. Says the Ramchal, or says the Chalban, I should say, in the Pekida stage, which is the first stage of Geula. So, in the outside world, everything looks normal. And everything looks natural. Right? At the end of the day, it's just a question of inside, there's dramatic change that's occurring. In my neshama, this change that's occurring. And I will say, you know what the incredible thing is? Sometimes, your neshama could be changing literally right in front of you, but you don't know it. The person doesn't feel it. The person doesn't experience it. If I'm not plugged in, then ultimately, at the end of the day, I can't feel those changes that are occurring internally. So says the Chalban, in Pekida stage, Geula, is unfolding. Changes are happening. They're cloaked in Tava, they're cloaked in the natural world. The real changes that are happening inside of me as well. But often in Pekida, I don't even have the das, the ability to actually understand what it is that is unfolding inside of me. So we'll say that's Pekida. What about Zechira? Ulachara tavo hazechira shiofas Hashem begilui k'divrei Ramchal. Then comes Zechira. But say last paragraph, page Samech Beis. What happens in Zechira? The Chalban writes, Viata achel lefarish inyan hazechira hetiv. Now let me explain to you what Zechira is. Writes the Ramchal. The Kasuv v'haya Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz. Pasuk in Zechariah says, and Hashem will be the king over the entire earth. Zeu tachlis hatova v'hashalom shevtiach HaKadosh Baruch Hu es Yisrael sheyis'angu bo la'asid lavo. I will say that pasuk that we say every single day, V'haya Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz, that Hashem will be the king, that refers to the period of Zechira. That refers to a time when all of humanity will recognize the Ribono Shel Olam. And ultimately, Zeu Tachlis Hatova V'Hashalom Shevtiach HaKadosh Baruch Hu Es Yisrael She'is An Gubol La'asid Lavo. that pasuk, V'hayo Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz, that's a haftacha. It's a promise that one day the Ribono Shel Olam's glory will become so apparent that all of humanity will accept him. V'avein, kilo amar v'hayo Hashem melech. It doesn't say Hashem will be melech. Rather, what does it say? Ela limelech. Ve'a'inyon kilo asid lavo yusar hara min aklipa umashi yishar mimenu yashuv tachas abod akidosha v'akira hakol ki akidusha hi hashoresh ha'amiti va'adon hakol. V'alkein amar v'hayo Hashem limelech al kol haaretz. Ki melech kol haaretz kivarhu u kivar hayatamid. Ki ein shum nivra po below b'shusa. See, I will say, you can't say bayomahu, right? Hashem will be melech hakol haaretz. Why? Because Hashem already is melech hakol haaretz. Right? Hashem already is the king. Nothing exists without HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ela she'en kol avadim akirim oso. So I will say, the problem contemporarily is not HaKadosh Baruch Hu's monarchy. What's his problem? What's his problem? Or what's the problem? Our lack of recognition of his monarchy. So if the pasuk were to say V'haya Hashem melech, that sounds like right now he's not a melech. He will become a melech, but that's not true. Ula asid lavo yakiru hakol v'yishtabdu elav miritzonam. So both say it's such a beautiful diuk. V'haya Hashem limelech al kol haaretz. Hashem will become a melech for the entire world. In other words, he's already the melech now, but when in the period of zechira, the second stage of geula, all of humanity accepts HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the king. They don't coronate him. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need a coronation. He is the king. He is the king. V'ayashem limelech means humanity will accept him or will recognize that monarchical identity that has been here the entire time. Ula asidlav, he goes on, Huma shenemar, ki az epoch ala amim lachin amar Hashem limelech, v'yiskabra or tamid, v'abrachos tischatshena b'chol shah, b'rov shalom v'simcha. So we'll say he goes on. Go to page Samech Gimel. Hine mevur in the Chalban. Hine mevur shazechira hi inyan his galus Hashem bebihirus. Ultimately, again, so the Ramchal says, sometimes the Chalban says that what's zechira? Zechira is explicit revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everyone sees the kingship of God. Everyone sees the shlita of the Ribono Shel Olam. So ultimately, one more piece, then we'll stop for just a few moments. V'yisod ha'hevdel. So we'll say, and wherein lies the fundamental distinction between Pekida and Zechira? Look at page Samach Gimel, the third paragraph. V'teida sha Pekida hi al yedei hayisod v'gilui hazechira al yedei tif'eres. V'lachein nimtza koach l'mashiach ben Yosef u'l'mashiach ben David b'shtei ha'pu'ulos v'kabel koach la'asos chal l'geula hasida. So we'll say, we'll see what that means in just a moment. But here, let's take a step back and frame this, because I think what the Ramchal is saying, what the Ramchal and the Chalban are both saying is something that I think has incredible profundity. We just have to let it swirl around a little bit. 2 stages in Geula. Stage number 1, Pekida. Stage number 2, Zechira. Pekida, the process of Geula is getting started. So we'll say, let's go again. What's the process of Geula under Pekida? What does that look like? It composed of 3 parts. Number 1, right. It's all natural, but what are the 3 parts? Number 1, Klal Yisrael gets up from dust. Number 2, ingathering of Klal Yisrael. Number 3, a return to Eretz Yisrael. That's Pekida. But it all looks natural. It all looks normal. Zechira, I will say it's interesting. According to the Chalban and Ramchal's model, Zechira doesn't necessarily have anything new occurring. What occurs in Zechira? It's right. The truth is, it's cognition. It's interesting. If you notice again, no one said this happens, that happens. In Zechira, it's a cognitive awakening. V'haya shalom chal haaretz. The Rebbe runs the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is accepted by all of humanity. Lav dafka that there's anything supernatural that's actually occurring. But man realizes the supernatural and natural. Man realizes the incredible nature of HaKadosh Baruch Hu just in this world. That's Pekida and Zechira. I want to tell you, it struck me that we're learning this piece today. So I just to give you an idea, of what I think what the Chalban is driving at with Pekida. So both say, so today was Yom HaShoah. Right? So, I've mentioned this a couple of times already. Yom HaShoah is always a very interesting day because Lemaisa, like in many communities, especially much of the frum world, so really mourning over Churban comes on Tisha B'Av. And it happens to be a discussion about Yom HaShoah from a halachic perspective is even fascinating because declaring a day of national mourning in Chodesh Nisan is not such a pasha thing as well. When it was first established, there was like a lot of debate about the particular date. But leaving aside one feels true Holocaust remembrance should be, leaving that aside. So I'm sure you saw the images. It's always startling, the images that come out of Eretz Yisrael every year, right? There's a 2-minute siren. And what happens? If you've ever been in Eretz Yisrael during Yom HaShoah, what happens in the 2-minute siren? Everything stops. When I say everything stops, like literally, cars stop on the road. People, and literally, cars stop on the road. People get out. And you see, if you look at the aerial pictures, it looks like there's traffic. It's not traffic. I mean, there is always traffic. But I'm saying, but it's just people stop. Let's say, when you look at that picture, do you know what that is? That's Pekida. How is it that less than a century after we were almost annihilated in gas chambers, in ovens, in mass graves, in ghettos, all of these things, and you see that there is a modern day Jewish state, there's infrastructure, Jews are commemorating that which occurred. You look at it, and on one hand, of course, it's supposed to be mournful. I'll tell you, it sounds strange. When I see it, I am overwhelmed by an incredible feeling of simcha. Because we'll say, that's Pekida. Now you can look at it, and you could say, okay, whatever. It's a Jewish state, it's great. We worked hard, we did this. We'll say, that's Pekida. Pekida is the stage of Galus where you could explain away everything, right? You can go ahead and you could say, this happened because of this, and this happened because of that. It's all Teva. All of it is Teva. But when you look underneath, when you pull back the layers, is it not miraculous? We'll say, think about the times that we're living in. Has Klal Yisrael been lifted up from the dust of Galus? Have we lifted up from the dust of Galus? What's the answer? Have we been lifted up from the dust of Galus? Yes. Absolutely yes. A resounding... we're still in Galus, I will say, but there's a big difference in being in Galus and in the dust of Galus. We are not in the dust of Galus, let's be honest. We're living large in Galus, right? We're living large. Galus. The reason why we're still here is because Galus is great. That's not a declarative statement. That's just more like a descriptive statement, right? We're not in the dust of Galus. We're not in the dust of Galus at all. I'm sorry? We're comfortable. But I'm saying, we're not in the dust of Galus represents a sense of oppression and suffering in Galus. We're not there. No. It's a problem.
We say we're not going to get there. I mean, pre-war Europe was like that. Very successful.
I am not a sociologist. It has never been like this.
I'm not saying it was exactly like this.
No. It doesn't even resemble this. No. In other words,
but the world didn't resemble this. Right.
I disagree with that. The world is absolutely the same. The world never changes. Vaharaya, you see what's happening in Russia and Ukraine right now. The world is the world. The Welt is the Welt. Like people kill people oppress people cheat people take care of people. There's all kinds of stuff. I don't think the human condition has changed, but I think when you look at Klal Yisrael, I think Klal Yisrael's matzav has changed so dramatically. I don't know that there's ever been a golden age of Jewry like the one we are experiencing right now. By the way, in every way, in Gashmias and in Ruchnius. And the Ruchnius piece is very important. The amount of Talmud Torah, let's say, it's funny, not funny. Everyone, whenever people speak about the state of affairs of Klal Yisrael, we always go back to the Pew study, right? To the Pew study. Israel, what is it? What's the rate of intermarriage?
For non-frum, it's over
75%, right? So let's say, so we look at that, and the truth is that number is tragic. And the truth is, at the end of the day, people, I think, often look at that number and they say Klal Yisrael is in crisis. There's a segment of Klal Yisrael that is in crisis, And there's in other segments that are booming and thriving. Now we're all one people, and when one segment is in crisis, we're in crisis. But there's this incredible dichotomy here, how you have certain streams that are unfortunately waning and literally disappearing before our eyes, and other streams that are experiencing explosive growth. So I just want to point out that we're in Galus, and we have to be cognizant of the fact that we're in Galus, and it should bother us that we're in Galus. But we're not in the dirt of Galus. We're just not in the dirt of Galus. What about Klal Yisrael being gathered together? Is Klal Yisrael gathered together? What would you say? I think, again, I don't know what the frame of reference is, but again, you have almost half of the Jewish population in Eretz Yisrael now, which is pretty amazing. Just another couple of years, hopefully be north of 50% of Klal Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael. So I think we have strong communities, Baruch Hashem. I think there's a certain level of communal cohesion that's profound, that's overwhelming. So I think I would go with the approach that Klal Yisrael is gathered together, and have we returned to Eretz Yisrael? Have we returned to Eretz Yisrael? That's a resounding yes. That's an absolute resounding yes. So we'll say, is it an incredible? The Pekida that the Ramchal and the Chalban are describing, these are our days. This is what we're living in. Yet I will say, how many of us actually think or feel that we're living in the age of Geula? And I think very often we don't think that way. Why? Because that's Pekida. That's what happens in Pekida. You see, in Pekida, it kind of things flow. Things flow. I will say, just like little things. I don't know exactly, what is it? Unicorns. Unicorns, right? They say now that there's I think it was in the journal today. It was something some 25 Israeli-based unicorns. Let's say it doesn't. Right? It's like a business thing. It's like
$1 billion
It's worth $1 billion or more.
good, but come on, aren't you guys in business? Dentist stuff. Yeah, okay, billions, not you only do trillions. Only do trillions. Good. All right, good. So my
A billion is what comes before trillion?
yes, is that? Got it. You got it. I'll bring better mashallah next time.
That's a CFO talk.
Yeah.
Got problems over there.
Say, I'm just pointing out, is it? I don't know. That's for sure. So again, but you think about this, and isn't it absolutely incredible? Isn't it absolutely incredible that we're living in an age of Pekida? We're living in a times of Pekida. Yet at the end of the day, we don't see it, we don't know it, we don't acknowledge it, because that's what Pekida is. Pekida is everything's unfolding, but it looks so natural. So I will say the next stage then in Gula. I just want to point out, when I was learning this piece today, and looking at everything that's going on in the world, the Chalban is describing our age. He's describing our days. We don't have to wait for Geula. We're waiting for the next stage of Geula. But this is literally Hakitsu. We have to wake up, V'raninu, and sing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because look at the days in which we are living. I have to tell you, I don't think anyone could disagree with this. I know there's always someone who could disagree with anything, right? I honestly think you cannot disagree with this. It is so blatantly clear and so blatantly obvious that these are the days in which we are living. Now again, how long does Pekida go on for? I don't know. Who knows? Well, what's the time frame of Pekida? But my point just is, what a feeling, what an incredible spiritual booster shot to know that I'm closer to the end than to the beginning. In other words, I'm in Geula.
But it's not irreversible.
Oh, don't say that. Don't say that. Nothing's irreversible. Of course, we're right. Beis Hamikdash wasn't. Yeah. I'm saying nothing. Yeah, nothing's irreversible. But again, we'd like to think that Geula is a trajectory. That's what we'd like to think. And by the way, the only people who derail our Geula is not Iran and it's not anyone else. The only people who derail Klal Yisrael's Geula is Klal Yisrael. That's always been
the Jews.
Right. That's right.
It's Blinken and Mali.
Yeah,
Jews.
that's always been the story of our people. That it's not the nations of the world who are problematic. It's us. All right, let's go weiter.
So we have to assume then that things like the tragedy that occurred at Mount Meron. And all the rabbis that died in Brooklyn for COVID, we have to assume that that's all part of Pekida, right?
Pekida isn't all, no part of Geula is all simcha. There's adversity and tragedy in everything. How that fits, who knows? Who knows? But absolutely. In other words, in the stage of Pekida, everything that happens during that chapter must somehow play some type of role. Absolutely. Absolutely. I will say, skip a little bit just because of time. I'll take it to the last page over here in Samechei. Samechei. See, he goes on, he says as follows. He says, V'lachein kamen b'nei Adam. So look at this last paragraph in Samechei. I'll say with this, we'll stop, we'll sing one more niggin, and we'll stop for tonight. So I'll say, but here is where the danger comes. Here is where the danger comes. He says, page Samechei, you have it? Samechei. V'lachein kamen b'nei Adam. And I will say, I'm not skipping the other because it's unimportant. It's all important. It's kind of just a little bit of an expansion of what we've already learned. But of course, please go on with it on your own. But look what he writes. V'lachein kamen b'nei Adam ubidimyonos shav v'chezyonos parchin. I will say, look at the beautiful lashon he uses over here. Therefore, but we have to be careful. Here the Ramchal says, he warns us. I'm sorry, the Chalban says, he warns us. We have to be careful. What do we have to be careful about? About people who come along with dimyonos shav, so that's actually a very profound, false visions, v'chezyonos parchim, and just kind of faulty outlooks, or faulty visions as well. Bo'im l'sartet es tukumosenu kidavar, she'ein bo neshama v'ruach, elo guf levado, v'am kichol hagoyim. So I will say, I think that this is a nuanced pushback against an anti-Zionist ideology. That there would be those who would want to come along and say that the establishment of the state, and I will say, it's not just the establishment of the state, it's important to understand that the state of Israel is the contemporary Medina, is the platform for everything that occurs within Eretz Yisrael. So I will say, that's true for the proliferation of yeshivas. I will say, again, you could have yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael because there's a Jewish government, because there's a Jewish army, because there's a Jewish police force, because there are governmental subsidies, right? These are things that people sometimes forget this. They think that the Medina is devoid of religion. So it could be that a system of government might be devoid of religion. But the Medina is the platform that allows for everything to occur. So the same thing, it allows for the high-tech sector. It also allows for dynamic spiritual growth. So the Chalban says there are those who want to say that the present-day ingathering of Am Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael is no different than any other people having a homeland. In other words, so Americans have America, and Russians have Russia, and Canadians have Canada. So Jews have the state of Israel. But just like, again, there's no Kedusha to Canada, there's also no Kedusha ultimately to the state of Israel as well. There's no Kedusha. He says it is like a She'ein bo neshama v'ruach elo guf levado. All it is a body. It's a shell. V'am kichol hagoyim. And in that respect, from a state perspective, it's very nice, but there's no Kedusha attached to it. V'chol zeh kalo yachlof. So the Ramchal says, the Chalban says that this has to be turned on its head. It's unequivocally false. It's not true. Ki tavo chachma balev ha'am v'das l'nafshenu yina'im lahakir Shem Hashem meforish sod hazechira sod hadas has Hashem hu yiyeh begiloi pnimius haTorah shirucha demalka mashicha. So I'll say, you see right now, the reason why you can't see the Kedusha in a lot of the things, even in Eretz Yisrael, is why? Because we're in Pekida. Because that's what Pekida means. Pekida means that Geula has started. Pekida means that Geula is here. But Lamaisi, you can't see it. It just looks natural. It's cloaked in Teva. It doesn't look like anything out of the ordinary. All it looks like is a body without a soul. But stay tuned, says the Chalban. Just wait. Let's keep pushing forward. Let's keep doing what we've been doing, building and growing and self-actualizing and trying to learn the Panimiyas HaTorah to bring the Geula closer. And that'll usher in the period, ultimately, again, of Sod HaZechira, Sod HaDas Hashem, the period of time we will know Hashem, V'yebegavli V'givli Panimiyas HaTorah, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be revealed to the Panimiyas HaTorah, Shirucha de Malka Meshicha, which is the spirit of Mashiach, V'ikuyam b'hamakasuv, ha'amochin b'choshech, ra'u ar gadlan. We will see the actualization of the pasuk in Yeshaya, that the nation who walked in darkness will one day see the great light. Shabbosai, such an incredibly profound yesod, and I think, at least I feel, it reframes the way we look at everything in this world. Right? It just reframes it. We're living in Pekida. We're living in Pekida, and what that requires me to do is to live with my eyes open and to look around what's happening around me. What's happening around me? And stop taking things for granted and ordinary and see that, wow, that's Geula, that's Geula, that's Geula. And during the period of Pekida, it's not obvious. It's cloaked to the natural world. So you have to look for it. And if you don't look for it, you could easily miss it. Easily miss it. But if we take advantage of the period of Pekida that we're in, and we're going to discuss it. I'll say our next week's show, we're going to talk about Amir Hashem. Like, say, how do you actualize Pekida? You see, let's say, if you notice, by the way that the Chalban, his style is, what he first does is he creates a framework, like a conceptual framework, and then there's like, okay, now what do I do with this? So now, Lemaisa, now I know, and it's very exciting. I know that I'm in Pekida, and I know that I want to maximize Pekida because I want to get to Zechira. How we're going to do that in Meretz Hashem is next week's shir. But I will say we should gain incredible chizuk, that Geula, according to the Chalban, is not something we have to anticipatorily pine for. It's not something that's in the future. It's already started. We're already in it. It's just right now it's nuanced, cloaked in nature, and we often miss it. But if we open our eyes, we open our hearts, we open our neshamas, and begin to really look at things for what they are, we will begin to see the true Yad Hashem all around us. Right, so stop over here for tonight. Shkoyach.
Hey, Rabbi.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say, I was listening to what you're talking about, the despair and the hiddenness of everything. You know, I read a lot about the Holocaust, biographies of people that were in the Holocaust. Can you imagine what it looks like to them? That they were like murdered, they were being murdered, their families were murdered, they were survived. They thought it was the end of the world, and then 3 years later, Israel happens. I mean, we're looking at it like we're living in it today, but they're looking at it like they came through different epochs in history.
100%.
You know, to them, it looks completely different than it does to us.
100%. I think the challenge we have is, with the passage of time, supernatural things become natural.
Right.
So for us, it's commonplace. But absolutely, our goal is to look at it with the same level of awe as they would have looked at it as well.
Right.
Absolutely.
The Rav said that it was the opposite. I mean,
Yeah. Called it a fake. Absolutely.
This didn't happen.
Right. Absolutely. There he was dafka referring to the establishment of the state. I think the Chalban is even being more expansive. It's not the establishment is one piece, but Lamaisa there's so much. Singing again.
You're saying it didn't, if it wasn't for the Holocaust?
Whether it was the Holocaust, there's
Yes.
so many things happen for the creation of the state of Israel that are not explained, including Stalin.
Is that left? He has Mishmar.
One of the people that died was from Brick stuff.
The Rav believes he's got a chance.
I don't think he did, but
That's
This Rob?
I'm sure every American is a sulfur. And, but
You're welcome.
it was a sad situation. They specifically mentioned. They specifically mentioned that he was a sulfur.
Yeah.
Brick stuff. I don't know if people I think in America
Could connect to it.
that's what they.
Yeah.
Good Shabbos, good Shabbos.
Oh, good Shabbos, good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos.
Reb Chaim Cohen.